It's 2 months now since Eurovision 2026 took place, with the least countries competing in the modern era and a very sizable dark cloud hanging over the entire thing. I'm here to tell you that next year it's going to be different. Maybe, if we're lucky. Whether that different will look and feel better than 2026 remains to be seen. Over the last couple of months, I've taken the time to wind my schedule back a little bit, observe the goings on around the contests, and try to build an understanding of developments behind the scenes. As a result, I'm going to make a few predictions about what we might see next year, based on what we know so far, covering all of the key issues surrounding the number of participants and surrounding Israel, as well as a couple of smaller things on the side. I should say in advance, you can probably hear I am ill. I don't know what has been going on the last 6 or 8 weeks. It's one of the main reasons why I've been posting so little. I have just had cold after cold after cold, so please just bear with me. Quickly before we begin, a word for our sponsor, Surfshark VPN. I traveled a lot during Eurovision season this year, and it was a lifesaver for me to be able to continue to watch the same series on Netflix or wherever else as I've been watching at home, as well as accessing series that are available elsewhere but not in the UK. Each time we went abroad, I'd enable it when we arrived and just forget about it. It was seamless and everything worked like back home. With Surfshark, you can quickly switch between 4,500 servers in more than 140 countries. So you've always got a fast and responsive connection. They're high speed, so you won't have to deal with buffering either. Eurovision finally came to YouTube in the US this year, but you can watch past editions there too by using Surfshark and setting your location to a European country. You can also watch back any region locked national finals by setting them to the relevant country. Surfshark also has the added benefit of letting you use the internet without being legally required to hand over your literal ID documents to random private companies with shady practices. And it protects your activity online from their prying eyes as well as everyone else's. With data companies and corporations gathering as much information about us as they possibly can, Surfshark gives you peace of mind by blocking ads and trackers, as well as keeping all of your web activity anonymous. I can't recommend Surfshark enough, and there is a 30-day money-back guarantee if you decide it's not for you. Go to surfshark.com/ESCGabe or use code ESCGabe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. As I alluded to in the opening, this year's Eurovision was not great. For reasons that I'll get into, we had the least number of participants and the smallest viewing public in a long time. What's good news from the contest point of view, though, is that I am now pretty confident the number of participants is likely to bounce back at the very least to the levels we saw between 2023 and 2025, and could, in a best case scenario, go from a long-time low of 35 to potentially 40 or above. There are a few different reasons for this. Firstly, we can look at the 35 we have currently. As it stands, I think the most likely scenario is that all 35 of them will participate again. Some of the more uncertain ones among those 35 have already been confirmed. Bulgaria won last year, so was certain from the start, and Romania have indicated that they'll be there next year as well. At the same time, there are still those that sit on shakier ground. In particular, Czechia's broadcaster is currently facing heavy funding pressure thanks to government interference. But given how bad things got in terms of results in the contest in 2024 and 2025, if they weren't going to withdraw after those recent failures, I'd be surprised to see them do it after 2026 when things went much better. As for some of the other uncertains, although there's no confirmation yet, I would be stunned if Moldova wasn't in the contest, given its critical importance to the broadcaster there, which spends more than 1% of its yearly TV budget on Eurovision alone. Montenegro has previously been highlighted as a potential dropout, but it would seem unlikely in the context of them hosting the Eurovision workshop later this year. This is a little-known event where all of the delegations in the contest gather to discuss potential changes to it. Going from literally hosting the contest in your backyard to withdrawing from it just a couple of months later doesn't really make sense. It's not the behaviour of a broadcaster who's preparing to leave. Elsewhere, the other question was about Belgium. The Flemish broadcaster VRT indicated initially that they wouldn't participate in the contest unless there was another vote on Israel's participation. And there'll be more on that in a minute. But we've heard basically nothing at all since they made that initial statement. And the issue on the Belgian side seems to have died down almost completely. Maybe this will suddenly flare up again around the time of participation confirmation, which is in September. But given the short amount of time until then, and the fact that there are no opportunities to hold a vote between now and then, I get the impression we would know already if the VRT was going to follow through on this threat. For that reason, I actually do think it's more likely they will remain in the contest for this year. Beyond those, almost every other 2026 participant seems to be pretty much locked in. The question then is whether that number will be bolstered by returnees and new debutants. In two cases, we already have our answer. North Macedonia confirmed extremely early on in May that they will be returning to the contest next year in Bulgaria. After that, we got some slightly more surprising news in the form of Canada. I made a whole video about this one earlier this month, so if you want to find out more about this decision, you can go and watch that. But the short version is that the requirements for being a full member of the EBU and therefore being able to participate freely in the contest were tweaked very slightly this year. It's now possible for non-European countries who have observer status at the Council of Europe. That's the US, Mexico, Japan, the Vatican, and Canada. The Canadian broadcaster then became eligible for EBU membership. They immediately took it, and 1 week later they announced they'd participate in Eurovision. This means they're in on the same terms as everyone else. It's not a special dispensation or arrangement like we have with Australia. Between those two, we're looking at 37 already as our baseline, provided nobody drops out. The next category of potential returnees are last year's boycotters. These were the Netherlands, Slovenia, Iceland, Spain, and Ireland. If I had to guess now, based on all the available information, I would expect some of these, but not all of them, to return to the contest. There are reasons for this outside of the original logic of the boycott. If I had to guess today, I think that Slovenia and the Netherlands will return to the contest. Spain and Ireland will stay out, and Iceland, I would put it as a 50-50. In Slovenia's case, it's simply a fact of evolving domestic politics. Since the last contest, Slovenia's more left-leaning government has been replaced by a quite right-wing one, with a very, very different approach to Israel. As we've discussed here before, the geopolitics of broadcasters usually mirrors, or at least doesn't conflict, with the geopolitics of the government. And so if the government's politics change, so does the broadcaster. For that reason, they'll be in Sofia in May, in my opinion. In the case of the Netherlands, it's more a peculiarity of the Dutch public broadcasting system, which has several different component broadcasters catering to different kinds of audiences. The broadcaster catering to over 65s, which is called Omroep Max, has publicly stated that they are interested in taking the contest on, which puts pressure on the current boycotting broadcaster Avrotros to return in order to avoid losing one of their most valuable programming assets. The other side to this is that the Dutch public broadcasting system is legally obligated to show Eurovision each year. That means sooner or later, one of these public broadcasters will put their hat into the ring and take it. And once Avrotros lose it, it's gone. It's not coming back to them. These pressures will make them much more amenable to a return, and I think it's going to happen. Iceland is one that I am less sure about. On one hand, Eurovision is the most popular program in the country. It gets a 99% viewing share on the night of the contest. This is the broadcaster's crown jewel there as a result, and there will absolutely be voices within the broadcaster who are desperate to come back. This is an extremely well-performing program that they're currently willingly leaving on the table. As well as that, the mechanism for them to return, in theory, won't be that complicated if it's the same as the one that took them out. Last year, just before the participation deadline, their board simply held a vote on whether they should stay or whether they should go. That board narrowly voted to leave. There's no way of saying whether that same board, if it met again now, would make the same decision. That said, the flip side of this is that the domestic politics of Iceland are very pro-Palestine. There are going to be a lot of voices, especially within cultural spheres in Iceland, who would feel strongly uncomfortable with the idea of competing alongside Israel. That tension is basically why I have them in the middle somewhere. I think the broadcaster has a business interest in returning to the contest, but doing so would come with a whole new set of problems. If they don't have answers to those problems, I don't know if it's going to happen. As for both Ireland and Spain, I really don't think there's any realistic possibility that we're going to see them at the 2027 contest. This is despite the fact there were some rumours flying around last week that Spain was beginning to come around and was potentially amenable to it. I also think it doesn't matter that both are continuing to participate in Junior Eurovision. This is a different competition. Israel is not in it, and the Irish broadcaster in that one is different. When it comes to the main contest, both RTE in Ireland and RTV in Spain reaffirmed their original stances after the contest this year, and they've shown no sign of moving. So for that reason, I wouldn't expect us to see them in Sofia in May. If I get all of these calls right, then we are up to either 39 or 40 participants, depending on if Iceland is in or not. In addition to that, I think there is still potential for one or two who've been out for longer to maybe give it a shot as well. Those two wildcards, while unlikely, are Slovakia and Hungary. Both have publicly indicated an interest in returning. In Hungary's case, it really is a matter of when rather than if, because the new prime minister in the country has indicated that this is a priority, and he has directed the public broadcaster to explore it. The reason why it might not be this year is that broadcaster is currently undergoing major reforms. This will hopefully turn it back into a trustworthy institution rather than a mouthpiece for the now former Prime Minister Viktor Orban. It may be a case of too many things to do in too short a time period to do a Eurovision participation in addition to this. Managing something like this is a full-time job, and so it may be you actually have to go and hire people first. That takes time. It might not be done in time for the deadline in September, and for that reason, we may be waiting until 2028 for Hungary to return. For Slovakia, it's something simple, and that is money. They need a contest that is cheap enough to be financially viable for them to enter. At the moment, it's not. That said, if we did get one of these two to return, we could end up in the extreme highs, nosebleed territory, actually, of 41 participants. With or without that, it would be a remarkable bounce back from last year, and for a contest that is desperate for a PR victory, I imagine it would be very welcome in the EBU headquarters in Geneva. What I hope will be realised there, though, is that that bounce back will depend on whether enough reassurances regarding the integrity of the voting, the EBU's decision-making processes, and the safety of artists and delegations have been made, as well as being based on cold hard cash. The more money the contest makes from sponsors, the more room for movement could be available on participation fees. We did see last year that Romania, Bulgaria, and Moldova were essentially cut a good deal in order to bring them back into the contest. That becomes possible if you have financial headroom. Financial headroom only comes through if you have enough sponsors behind the contest to provide it. The EBU did hire a commercial director last year, and they made a big song and dance about it. So this is time for that person to demonstrate their worth. All of this, though, will ultimately remain revolving around one thing. It's the reason why some of these countries are out. It's the biggest single reputational and branding risk to the contest, and by far its biggest ethical failing. That's the participation of Israel. There's no reason to think that it is going to change at all this year. My position on this issue, by the way, is long known, and you can search this channel if you're not already aware of it. It'll become pretty obvious pretty fast. My reasons for continuing to cover this contest as well are clearly stated in those videos. I stand by them and I won't apologize for them. I genuinely believe that what we do here does good for the contest and helps negate a lot of the negative ways in which Israel is using and manipulating it. That position is going to be the same in 2027. Unfortunately, it is going to continue to be a major issue because there is no signs whatsoever that Israel will be removed from the contest at this stage. The director of Eurovision, Martin Green, is on record saying that the EBU considers the matter to be closed and will not consider holding another vote on this, even though there is still theoretically another general meeting of all the broadcasters in December where this could theoretically take place. Most importantly here, though, is not the administrative things, or to be honest, what the EBU thinks. Much more importantly is the fact that Europe is simply not in a place where a cultural boycott of Israel is likely to materialize in the near future. This was only ever a distinct possibility, really, for a couple of weeks in September last year, and it has not been before or since. Until such a thing becomes widely accepted and implemented policy, as it very quickly did in the days following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, it's just not going to happen. Their removal from Eurovision would have to come as a consequence of a wider boycott rather than something that could run ahead of it, because publicly funded broadcasters are not going to put their own heads above the parapet on issues like this when the governments that fund them won't do it. That said, given the clear developments in the contest's security methods around voting and the likelihood that such development will continue, I'm willing to cautiously predict that at the moment, the contest is winning the battle against wide-scale voting manipulation benefiting Israel. This manipulation is a fact, it's a matter of public record, and if I see people bleating about this in the comments again, I'm just going to mute you. This is not up for debate. In 2026, Israel's televote, which was completely disconnected from the quality of the song, fell again from 297 last year to 220 this time around. Incidentally, I actually predicted this number perfectly several weeks before the contest and then completely forgot about it.
Phase of it anymore. I think so, maybe 220 from the televote or so. At the same time,
because we don't know what Israel is going to send and whether there is a voting public that will judge them on merit alone, in addition to that manipulation, we can't say for sure how they're going to do next time around. But given that security measures in the voting process have clearly cut the legs off these efforts to manipulate it, we can be hopeful that these efforts will be even more successful next time around. While that probably screens off a complete catastrophe, i.e. Israel winning, simply surviving because Israel hasn't won isn't a sustainable or ethical way for this event to continue. And sooner or later, the worst case scenario probably will happen if nothing is done. That is something that the contest probably couldn't recover from. So that's the context that the 2027 Eurovision Song Contest will take place in. To be honest, it's far from ideal, but at the same time, it will feel different next year if more broadcasters are taking part, if the TV audiences recover from their dismal low this year, and if boycotting broadcasters feel comfortable enough to return to the fold again. That said, it's never going to feel the same as long as we have that elephant in the room. Elsewhere, after the last few years, I do think that Eurovision is in dire need of a good year musically as well. 2026 had some really good live performances and songs that suited this particular stage. And that is great because of course we need that. Ultimately, it's a show, right? But the long-term health of this contest in an era like this requires commercial viability that attracts in the highest caliber of artists. I think we have to be honest and ask ourselves how much we're listening to these songs after the contest this year compared to previous years. There's a lot that, to be honest, I have simply stopped listening to entirely. They just didn't interest me anymore. That means next year we need more than just Bangaranga in terms of a commercial hit. That was the only pop song with widespread international appeal that emerged from the show this year. The writing was kind of on the wall because streaming numbers for most of the contest songs were abysmal for the entire run-up, and that wasn't helped by the fact that so many fans have just walked away from the event entirely. Those numbers didn't get much better after the event either, and they have stayed very low for this era. We really can't have that happening again this year, and luckily I think the fact that Bangaranga was so handsomely rewarded, not just by the public but by the juries as well, will help us get a little more buy-in from labels in future years. This in turn should bump up the level of the artist in the contest and bump up the level of the song quality. If nothing else, I imagine Canada is going to throw several kitchen sinks at this thing, at least for its first few attempts. So if nothing else, they'll probably do something great. Finally, as for who or what will win the contest, it's naturally a fool's errand to predict it so soon, but as surely as night follows day, I'll probably get overexcited about whatever Finland does, because I always seem to do that. At least I'm consistent. In all seriousness, I think a lot of the contest's orthodoxies died this year, and we're not going to have a traditional Eurovision ballad like what Delta Goodrem had, or something operatic win anytime soon again. Now, I've said it, it'll probably happen, but I'm used to cursing everything, so with that, it is time to wrap up for today. This is a contest that is far from being in good health, but somehow, despite a nightmare few years, there are genuine green shoots here of growth, and there's plenty of reasons to try and continue fighting for this thing. First, though, we're going to be having a lot of Eurovision Asia content because that is coming up in just a few months. Hopefully I will be there in Bangkok to see it happen, so keep your eyes open for that. In the meantime, thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you again very soon.